The next speaker is Dr. Jan Salem, who is another engaged network co-investigator from School of Civil Engineering at the University of Leeds. And her talk is co-producing heritage with young people, developing an active culture of engagement in communities. Dr. Jan Salem is an architect, associate professor at the University of Leeds. She was a fellow of the Senator George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, Security and Justice. She holds a PhD from the University of Sheffield and held permanent posts in several schools of architecture in the UK. Dr. Selim is leading the Architecture and Urbanism Research Group at the University of Leeds, with research covering interdisciplinary methods bridging between architecture, urban politics, and sustainable design. Dr. Selim is leading several HRC GCRF-funded research projects with extensive fieldwork experience in the Middle Eastern conflict zones in Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Kosovo, and Northern Ireland. She is the author of Unfinished Places, The Politics of Remaking Cairo's Old Quarters, Routledge 2017, and Architecture, Space and Memory of Resurrection Northern Ireland Shareness in a Divided Nation. Dr. Selim, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Gamal, for the introduction. I just want to be sure what you can see on your side, because I have plenty of windows open in front of me.
We can see your talk, your presentation, and the cover slide.
All right, brilliant. All right, so thank you very much, Gamal, for the introduction, and thank you so much, Mike, for the fascinating talk you've just introduced, because I think that really ties a lot with what's going to be coming in terms of discussions and having critical reflections about what the network is about and what humanitarian heritage is about. And I will be really looking forward to that. As Gamal mentioned, hello everyone. First of all, my name is Jan Salem, and as Gamal rightly mentioned, I'm an associate professor of architecture at the University of Leeds and one of the Engage Network co-investigators. And I'm really delighted to be here today among all of you, and also delighted to be working in this project and this network from, as just Mike said, it's been about 3 years that we're trying to pull everything together, build a case and build a network. And it's really fascinating to see how this network has been growing over time, despite the whole challenges that we have been all facing for the past year and a half, definitely because of COVID and many, many other things. So the outreach is amazing and we're growing, and I'm seeing that the network is expanding in a very professional and in a rightly manner. My talk today is going to be about co-producing heritage with young people. And this is really a topic of working with young people and applying bottom-top approaches that has really been my scope of work for many, many years now. And a lot of the work and the empirical work that I'm doing is involved with working with young people. My presentation will explore the notion of co-production of heritage with the youth, and specifically looking at young people in the global south. And indeed, notions of youth participation, justice, reconciliation, empowerment are often used transnationally without reflecting on the relevance of these terms and how do they work together, how do they combine together, in particular with cultural frameworks. So here I seek to address some of these debates concerning, first of all, how, when, and why participatory heritage might be used with and for young people through a series of research and practice-led projects and initiatives. So it is very inclusive and a progressive space and creating progressive spaces for young people in several spots in the global south. And I've been working with many of them in Lebanon, in Egypt, in Kosovo, in Jordan, in Iraq, in many, many other spots. So we all have different ways and relations to connect with the past. And in reality, we all deal with heritage in different ways and different manners, and we interpret it differently. And we understand it as a concept that incorporates far more than just the physical features, but we look at the intangible as well. We look at the people, we look at the communities, we look at the spirits, we look at the memories, which could be also identified and managed and controlled as the historic environment in a professional sense. And actually, we do promote the value of heritage as a cohesive resource from which future generations discover where they come from and how can they navigate that future, how can they understand it. And as Mike just rightly said, heritage is not the past, heritage is the present. So this is underlaying the idea behind various awareness-raising programs that aim to secure a wide degree of social protection for heritage by its citizens. So the only thing here is that these ideas of moral duty are linked with the notion of the legacy of heritage and has certain values, which is an idea that today is being challenged on numerous fronts. And therefore, my aim today in this talk is twofold, that I'm arguing that, first of all, that the co-production and participatory heritage design can help communities and individuals to face peace-building initiatives. The second is that engaging young people in these processes is particularly effective due to their ability to approach issues from a new perspective and to make real change happen. So while cultural heritage is central to shaping our identities, but the way how it is interpreted is essential for our common future. And asking the question of how can cultural heritage shape young people in the global South to reflect upon their strengths and weaknesses, and upon their values, upon their cultural treasures, and upon their cultural forces. And trying to answer those questions will be the scope of my presentation in the coming 18 minutes or so. So as I said, I've been interested in working with young people in many, many ways and aspects and through many projects, but why young people matter for us? They matter because they represent a high portion of the world's population, almost 1/5 of the world population, and are mostly ignored in decision-making and planning for economies and societies that they will inherit. For example, recent data from the British Council Next Generation Global Research highlighted 3 critical areas of concern for young people in that space. First of all, that there is a crisis in education, where young people in conflict countries feel that the quality of education is lacking and does not prepare youth for employment. The second is a crisis in the availability of decent work, whereas unemployment is rapidly growing in these countries due to the dropping rates of economic growth, and young people mostly hit. Third is the exclusion of young people from voice and agency, where they feel underrepresented and face distrust of politics, even where there is newfound democracy. So within these urgent actions, the negative outcomes for young people will translate into significant longer-term impacts, ranging from economic stress and mental health issues. So here, I would like to provide some theoretical thoughts and touch base on interconnected issues of development, power, and change. And I also want to understand how critically and creatively young people could engage with notions and processes of power, development, and change. Making change is difficult, and it's also difficult to identify how can we achieve it, and raising the question of who determines the condition and goals of the change, and how these are negotiated within groups and at what level change happens. And so there is no single answer to how change happens. We cannot define that. However, we could provide insights into creative, innovative, and participatory approaches that aim to provide young people with the support, tools, spaces for deep reflection on the types of change they would like to see. This research engages on multiple theories, such as Pierre Bourdieu's articulation of the notion of embodied cultural capital, where culture and social norms are naturalized and taken for granted, simply because the deep-rooted nature of the daily practices, the structures and relationships that appear so ordinary and predictable as to go unquestioned. The second is understanding that power is knowledge. So questions about change are also linked to that concept of power, where it's associated questions of how power is produced and reproduced to maintain a particular social order and level of public compliance with the social order. Michel Foucault, for example, notes that power is global and appears in every moment of social relations. Hence, its operations are not departures from the norm, but rather they are constantly present and existing. So the main thread across all the projects I will be talking about in a minute takes these notions that meaningful change happens not only because at the individual and community level that is wanted, but also at the broader level of discursive interaction. So, for example, by engaging young people in critical analysis of dominant narratives and as means to negotiate and their own alternative stories and truth, that it will have more resonance for them. The third and the final element here is development. So the need for change is also about how to bound up with the desires for development. But the question is, whose version of development are we looking for to implement, and which version counts? And asking where are the people in current planning, and to what extent are their interests served in top-down priorities, underpinned by focus on economic and social growth. So understanding how can we implement that? What kind of methodologies do we want to use to engage with the youth? And the most important thing is that allowing them to have voices. So their voices are the methodology. These voices are the methodology. And building on multiple and rich theories, we acknowledge that obtaining genuine local knowledge comes from the ordinary people and community. They prove their credibility as sources through their ability to articulate complex idea and address complex problems through arts, maps, photos, artwork, filmmaking, and many, many other ways. Moreover, in addition, also that voice plays a crucial role in relation to research methodology and co-created outputs. And there is a current suggestion that the everyday existence of marginalized young people is not already negotiated and shared and expressed, and that it's only through research that it can be voiced. At its simplest level, voice in research methodology is data for us, and these voices are analyzed by the use of researchers in terms of broader knowledge production and also the opinion, point of view, turn of phrase, or character in the creative output produced by the young people. So the co-production of heritage is a powerful tactic for us to deploy at the connection of these several domains, and the political, the social, and the economic. So in my previous talk in the opening of the Engage Network last year, I used the term heritage interpretation to ask a simple question. How can we be enabled to make links with our heritage? And how can we connect with people with the legacy of their past and to turn personal experiences into sources of inspiration and creativity? As I mentioned earlier, the youth are well placed to be trained as facilitators and leaders of ongoing peace-building initiatives. Hence, it is important here to critique the concepts of youth and memory in relation to the context of peace-building initiatives in the Global South. So for that, co-production methodologies can have many added values for participatory work undertaken in various contexts with the aim to capture the complex sensory experiences and enabling the expressions of emotion and the revealing of the untold stories and narrative. And here in the diagram I'm just showing here, these are the keywords that we have been capturing for the past 7 years working with young people of what can we do and what does it mean for them, the co-production, what elements are we trying to capture. So the overall goal of these, so co-production vastly helped our research to produce authentic knowledge through creative processes, such as producing creative pieces of short films, arts, photography, 360 imaging, VR, and other unconventional research dissemination outputs. And the examples I will present shortly will demonstrate that. We plan to support this work for four specific ways. First of all, building new collaborations by developing an interdisciplinary and international partnerships to support collaborative programs. The second is raising awareness among the young people to promote an understanding of participatory practice and how it can benefit the wider communities. The third is building capacity by raising the profile of local expertise to develop practical skills and training that will benefit the wider cultural sector. So here I will just talk briefly about 2 examples drawn from projects I lead already that have been funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council for developing new approaches and methods to engage young people in dialogue and to become receptive with their lost history. A significant thread across this work is the use of creative arts-based participatory approaches for working with young people, either affected by conflict or displacement or marginalization or even neglect. And what we found is that co-production has enabled our young stakeholders to express and confront personal and collective memories and to articulate often abstract ideas about the past self and community and identity. So the first project I will talk about is the Belipok Cairo Museum's itineraries, and that is the short name for it is BICAMI. That project was funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in 2016 and 17, working in Egypt, looking at the concept of Belipok, which was developed as an innovative way to reconnect fragments of history of the 19th century and the early 20th century liberal era in Egypt, representing its neglected museums. So in that work, we selected 12 museums as shown on the map here, which represent 3 types of Egyptian history. It's either that their tangible architectural heritage is of high historical significance, or for their tangible exhibits and content, or they were selected for their intangible heritage linked to the socioeconomic culture and political condition of the Arab Renaissance at that time. Interestingly, most of these buildings, which became museums afterwards, and they are currently still museums, have survived years of neglect and lack of community attention. When we started our pilot work with young people in Egypt, only 3 out of 20 youth were aware of the existence of these museums. So we wanted to advertise their existence, expand their collections, perfect their displays, place them on the touristic itineraries, and make them, by and large, more visitor friendly. We also wanted to enable the young people generation to rediscover the emotional appropriation and attachment to these museums. We started by designing 4 interactive itineraries, as shown here on the map in different colors, which were accessible and practical to use due to the museum's location in central Cairo within a walking distance from 3 underground stations and a total catchment area of 3.5 kilometers. So it could be a very simple journey on a day to take by walking only. We also developed several outputs. First of all, we established the basis for future twinning activities between the Egyptian Railway Museum in Cairo and the UK National Railway Museum in York, through their exhibits and opening virtual windows between both museums in the UK and Egypt, and specifically looking at the early history of the railway and steam engine of Robert Stephenson and UK's introduction of railway in North Africa. We also co-produced key educational content and games to engage school children with the museum exhibits. These have changed the way school teachers and their pupils have engaged with the museum exhibits through encouraging curiosity, inclusion, ownership, engagement, and the use of multiple skills. So the school kids were aged 10 to 15 and university students aged 18 to 21. To engage them with the museum through the co-production of the physical itineraries design and linking them for the first time into closed loops and clusters. We also developed an interactive BICAMI website to display information of each of the 12 museums and linking them via a virtual itinerary platform of walkable and thematic clusters to increase their visibility and accessibility. And please feel free to go and access the website, which is bicami.com, and have a look at, it's more of an interactive experience just to look at the museums, more information about them, and to navigate the itineraries. Between April 2017 and May 2020, a total of 45 local schools have used the BICAMI games and the activities, and here I'm reflecting on measured impact, which translated into 4,400 children from schools in addition to 400 from family visitors. So we have been monitoring, even the project has ended and concluded, but we have still discussions with the museum of monitoring the impact and the number of visitors. The team was also privileged to receive recognition by the International Council of Museums in ICOM Egypt for the Best Project Award and Best Practice in Public Engagement with Museums in Egypt in May 2017. The second project, now moving to Jordan, in Erbid, the north of Jordan, this is another project that is still ongoing, so we have not concluded that yet, is the Living Museum of Qais project, or what I call it, Qais Heritage, which is really a fascinating place, a distinctive archaeology and heritage site in northern Jordan. And it's also tentatively is listed on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 2001. So Qais is a key touristic destination. It receives around 147,000 domestic visitors and around 45,000 international tourists every year. Remains of the city still show theaters, a basilica, a church, baths, and vaulted shops and tombs. And in 1860, new settlers built courtyard houses, creating a new layer of structures on top of the original Roman city. And in the 1980s, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in Jordan decided to relocate the community to another village nearby, about 40 kilometers far away from the village, to protect the archaeological remains. And since then, stories of displacement and relocation have never ended. This is the Roman theater, one of the fascinating places as well in Qais. The site is also currently at risk of many things, and that's why we were struck to be working there for the past 2 years and still ongoing. So there is physical deterioration and insecurity due to the environmental factors of human factors, such as the looting happening there. And there is lack of knowledge about sustainable heritage techniques and limited appreciation and awareness of the site's importance among the young people of the local community of Qais, resulting in the reduction to tourism and limiting the site's socioeconomic potential. And this is one of the key issues that took us to go and try to work there, and our focus in the work that we are trying to do. So the Qais project is part of an effort to rebuild the connections between the local community and both the remains of the Ottoman village and the archaeological remains of the ancient city. And we aim to revitalize the community's sense of place and interest in their heritage, and in doing so to support sustainable heritage approaches that benefit the local economy. And also we're trying to ensure protection for all aspects of the site's past. This work heavily relied on the production of online content that varies from creating interactive virtual reality environments, 360 visualization, drone imaging, conducting interviews, and developing, directing short films, developing digital story maps, and more.
Gehan, if you can start to wrap up, please, for a couple of minutes.
Give me 3 minutes.
Okay.
All right. We also conducting training and capacity building workshops with the young community and the young population in Qais, which utilize the breadth of experience and knowledge to engage the local youngsters and early career heritage professionals to build capacity in mapping and recording using the latest 3D digital approaches. So we developed resources of cultural heritage expertise within the local community that can support sustainable economic development and allow them to use these techniques and methodologies in the future for income generation. We also worked closely with students at the nearby Jordan University of Science and Technology to co-produce children trail maps, community maps, site visitor resources, and all these resources will be very soon will be available in the visitor center in Qais, and we're working on that. Hopefully within 2 or 3 months we will have a permanent exhibition in Qais very soon. We also co-produced customized artistic artifacts using architectural elements and motifs inspired by the site. And this is all co-produced by the young people there. They also co-produced animation and short films and online content under the title of The People of Qais, trying to reveal back the untold stories of displacement of the people. How do they still memorize the places that they lived in, the houses, the rooms, their practices, their food? How did they manage to live in there for many, many years? And they still remember those memories and that history. So learning through heritage and enhancing youth engagement, and trying to wrap up very quickly, my final reflection would be that the methodology we implemented enabled our young participants to go beyond collective memory and become more critically analytical of the basis for identities that they hold. The digital outputs and the co-production outputs they have used really captured the youngsters' interest and imagination and allowed visualizing these narratives of buildings or sites using new media for them. They enabled also moving into the virtual representation of historical and heritage sites to seek sources of evidence that allowed them to make conclusions on the basis of evidence, making their own judgments and build their own conclusions and realize which inquiry process of historical concepts they are working on. The third side of this is that they learned from non-symbolic first group experience and were encouraged and required to collaborate and provide a social atmosphere. Finally, these aim to engage young people in the concept of hybridity and the complexity of the history of their nation and telling their own story. So each case study and project has a specific content knowledge that sadly, because of the time, cannot be covered here for much, but focus that can be that communities are diverse, have diverse historical influences on modern society. And the focus was not only simply on reading factual information about the history and culture, but to look around and move from place to another and to question the preconception for the youngsters to construct their own understanding and opinions from the evidence of different influences. So I will stop here. Thank you so much. But you can have a chance to look at the website of Qais Heritage here, where you'll find a lot of visual tours, 360 tours that you can navigate the museum. You can look at each section of the old Roman city. You can watch the videos about the stories of the people who lived there and have been displayed, and more to see. You can also follow the Twitter account and our Facebook page. And thank you very much. And sorry for taking more time.